I chose Mika Vainio techno record under his alias, one of his albums on Sahko, and I chose it because it's early enough that in techno's overall history that you get an idea that this is somehow completely uncompromising, but it still fits this new style and it still fits a party atmosphere. I feel like that's one of the earliest records I've got where we got this completely new sort of clinical aesthetic. It's almost academic and conceptualized in a way that you'd find in big institutions like ad firms and things like that. And that seems to be a really cool early example of people taking things like that into their own hands. Like, we can do this. Like, some people like to say that Mika was one of the guys to formulate what lots of people call minimal techno. We got this idea that lots of it came from, or lots of it did come from Detroit. Around 92, 93 is what you call second era Detroit sound, which is this super minimal reduced sound that completely distances itself from house, where I think they could easily be interchangeable up until that point. Acid lines and like really full arrangements and tons of sounds and silly samples, lots of humor. And this is a much more bleak and reduced. Reduction is definitely the key word here. Sort of approach. Like, you just didn't see it elsewhere. And it's interesting that it was almost, probably lots of people didn't even know that this stuff came out of Finland for years. You hear lots of stories of you just assume that everything came out of Detroit or the States or Berlin or places like that. So you can see this is as clean as it gets. And it's also, I really like it because it's so misleading, because there's some deeply, deeply uncomfortable stuff on here. Like, Mika Vainio is a pretty accomplished noise artist, and everyone knows that. But I didn't actually know that getting into the project. So you get all these very uncompromising sound choices, lots of high frequencies that literally hurt your ear. You have to sneak it in. You have to be a bit, like, I can't just throw it on. There's like I said, deeply uncomfortable and just super minimal. Not very dance floor friendly stuff, but it's got a message I'd like to incorporate in pretty much everything I do. Things don't have to be, it's pushing some nice boundaries. It's like all of the stuff that techno can push, basically. You've got this form that's really normally situated for the dance floor, but they're using that for something completely different. I don't think this record was written to be danced to as such, but it works in that sense, and it works on its own, and in both contexts is pretty alien, even a good 20 years after now. It's the thing, it's quite different, or it's a departure because all of the stuff I've done has been fairly dance floor orientated. So it's definitely, that was a discovery, a revelation almost. Like, it can be this weird. There are lots of people that have done it before, but this is just, strange and beautiful at the same time. Just really going in on those two things alone feels really valuable to me. And I was just happy to see that I can get away with things like that. It's been a frustration in earlier projects that things get locked down too early, and there has to be room for these kind of things. So it fits really well still, and it still sounds great. It really, really sounds good, despite actually kind of a thin pressing. But there's a few lessons there still. Again, 20 years past, like, maybe things haven't progressed as much as we like to think sometimes. It's a good reminder also.